standing on the unceded land of the Caddo Wichita Comanche people. We honor the generations of stewardship these indigenous peoples have given to the water, air, and land. Hi, my name is Tiffany Jackson, and I am the Director of Education for the Bishop Arts Theater Center. We're excited to bring you this interview series with several playwrights who received commission awards for our How to Be project, 10 Plays for Racial Justice. These videos are generously sponsored by our presenting sponsor, the Frederick Loewe Foundation. In 2021, we commissioned 10 Texas-born or based playwrights to pen a script based on Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's best-selling book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. BATC will produce the world premiere of this powerful, brilliant, and deeply moving festival beginning February 17th through March 6th. These performances are timely and have never been more important in the fight for our shared humanity. We are thrilled to hear from a few creative minds behind our How to Be project.
All right. Hi there, Kristen. Hi. Welcome to hey. Welcome to this interview series for the How to Be project with the Bishop Arts Theater Center. Really appreciate you, and I just loved your play that you submitted for the festival. I cannot wait to see it when it goes up, and I cannot wait to see what these actors really do. I did want to know, in terms of just for you, and in reference to the book How to Be, how did you come up with this idea in conversation with the book itself, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, I love that question. And thank you for the time today to be in conversation with you and for your kind words about the play. How did I come up with this idea? Well, first of all, I love the book. I love how he lays out this framework for what active anti-racism looks like. Mm-hmm. And I was really struck that he starts the story from this familial place, basically saying, in order to understand my journey, you have to understand who raised me. And a lot of my work is intergenerational. I'm from Dallas. My people are from Texas, at least 7 generations back on my mom's side, my dad's side. And a lot of what I have to say in my writing is similar to what Dr. Kendi does in the book with, if you want to understand what I'm talking about, you have to understand the people I come from. So early on, he's talking about how his parents met, and this is before he's even born. And he's talking about his parents as young people and his parents in college, and his mother was in Liberia working, and his father was this poet in New York. And he has this question about, or this thought about, I wonder what would have happened if they had pursued that dream instead of coming back to the US and, getting reasonable jobs, which is understandable. But what would have happened if mom had continued to teach on the continent and dad had come there to support her and let the continent of Africa inspire his poetry? So that really struck me as somebody who spends most of my time in West Africa. Today I'm in Mexico. I split my time between Mexico, the US, and Ghana, but mainly I'm in Ghana. So I think a lot about what it means for African Americans to leave the States and what it means for the generation before us to have made those choices just based on the expats that I know in Ghana. So all of that really informed my curiosity about, well, he's wondering what would have been. Let's create it. Let's put it on stage and really imagine what would have been.
Yeah. So wonderful. And one of the things that I was also very stricken by with your play is that while there was a lot of social commentary and there was a lot of really necessary and very serious conversation, the one thing that it always stuck to was joy. That they leaned on things like their joy, their romance, that there was nothing that could truly really overcome the fact that they do love each other, and the circumstances, circumstances notwithstanding, there was still a lot of deep love in every word that they said, even if it went into places that might sometimes be a little bit contentious. Could you speak a little bit towards, the place of joy in your writing and how it moves you and how it affected the script specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot about, I ask myself often, how have Black people survived all that we've been through? When you look at the full trajectory of our journey from the continent, through the slave dungeons, through the Middle Passage, through the plantations, through Jim Crow, redlining, through all of the systems of oppression that we're still working to overcome now, like, how have we done it? How have we managed all of this? And I think the answer is joy. There's something almost, I hesitate to use the word superhuman, but something supernatural for sure, where it's like, even I think scripture talks about that peace that surpasses understanding. There's also this joy that surpasses understanding. It's like, if you look at the facts of what is and the joy that we still manage to have and the sense of humor and the love, it's incredible. So every chance I get, I love to highlight that in my writing, that it really is, I feel like, one of our superpowers as a people. And I think most oppressed people can relate to that, right? So yeah, and that's something I adore about these characters, is the real love that they have for each other and the care, even when they're acting up, that they still care deeply for one another.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the really striking things, and then it's more of a question of like your opinion, not necessarily in the play itself, but in the show, there's a comment that's made where the male lead says, Black women were the place on which to build, sow, and harvest. Why we always got to be the mules of the world, saving and take care of everybody once y'all made the mess of things. Do you feel this felt like it was very true? Like it was coming from a place of truth. There's lines that a playwright writes. It's just like, oh wait, that's coming from a deep place right there. That's not
that was personal.
Exactly. That's coming from a deeply personal place. And I was wondering what your thoughts on that line specifically were, and well, not just specifically, but as socially as a whole for Black women.
Yeah, that's interesting. The things that as a fellow writer that you would pick up that maybe other people wouldn't. Yeah, I feel like that's a discourse that Black folks, especially men and women, have been in for a long time. Like, how do we support one another? I think about that Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin interview where they're talking about that. Like, how do we show up for one another in our intimate spaces? And so with those lines or that section of the play, I'm really just trying to flesh that out and bring that forward and make space for people to have that conversation.
Do you think that this belief still rings true today? Does it have relevance to the community? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's incredible about the moment that we're living in now is that I see so many Black women, in the words of Maxine Waters, reclaiming their time. So many, like one of my favorite Instagram pages is the Nap Ministry, and the way that she encourages Black people, but especially Black women, to rest, and not only to rest for ourselves, but to rest as a form of reparations because our ancestors weren't able to rest, but to really take care of ourselves. How we have this whole movement of care for Black women that we're giving ourselves, and that we're seeing more of that coming from other people in our communities, Black men and everybody else. So yeah, I think this conversation is still super relevant. Like what Black women have been carrying, but not just Black women, Black men too, and Black people of all genders. Right. Yeah, so I think it's still super important that we talk about that in particular.
Right. You mentioned a little earlier James Baldwin, and one of the things that kind of strikes me as a kind of parallel is James Baldwin's own journey is that he left the United States for France for quite a bit of time, and he experienced life out there, but he felt the need to return to the United States. In your play, there's also a migration, but of the opposite sense, and choosing to do the opposite rather than to return to America to perhaps make a permanent move for one or the other, and that's where the kind of, I don't want to spoil nothing in the play. That's where kind of their contention comes from. But do you feel as though there is something to be said about leaving for the sake of your own self or your own
Yeah.
health, as you were saying, rest,
Yeah.
or for yourself. I would love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as somebody who spends most of my time outside of the US, but who all of my family's there, I feel deeply connected to that land and that space. But I also understand that for my peace of mind, for my own personal health, for my own creative process, it's much more generative and healthy for me to be somewhere else. And Baldwin talks about the same thing, right? That in France, he doesn't have to worry about the police. He doesn't have to be looking over his shoulder. And of course, racism is there. Anti-Blackness is global. We understand that, right? But I mean, it's hard to even describe the level of peace I feel in a place like Ghana. Like the complete weight that's lifted from my shoulders, the level of things I don't even have to consider going in the store. Nobody's going to follow me because I'm Black. Everybody's Black. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that just frees up so much mental space, so much spiritual space, so much energetic space to be able to do the things that matter to me. So I don't know if personally, if I'll return to the US long term, but I think for the characters in the play, they're very young. They're in their early 20s. So I think for most people, I would encourage most young artists in particular, spend some time out of the US, go feel that feeling and bring it back to your community, bring back what you learned. You know, at some point, I would love to at least spend more of my year in Dallas and take the lessons that I'm learning around the world and bring it back to my folks at home, and let them also inform me. And so we can be in conversation, more of a global conversation.
Yeah, no, it really is important for people to get a full the multiplicity, the multifaceted experience of life. And you sometimes got to leave home. That's sometimes the best thing that you can do. In order to appreciate home, you got to leave home. And in order to see how to fix home, you got to see what other houses look like, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest conversation points in your play is the notion of what it means to be free and what that looks like. What is the direction of freedom, or what is the direction toward freedom, rather? And I would just love to know your own thoughts, because you really embody both points of views very, very well, in such a way that I'm just very curious. Like, what are your thoughts towards that ultimate freedom, and where do you land on that issue? Because, like I said, both of them, without spoiling, they both take really, really strong stances.
Yeah.
Both of them are really, really well supported, and I'm just like, oh, this is great. So I love to know your personal feelings on the matter.
Yeah, I think just to clarify for anybody watching, that I think the two stances we're talking about here is, one character believes in order to be free as a Black person, you have to leave the US, leave it behind. And the other character believes that there's a lot of freedom to be found in the US, this country that we can say that we built in a lot of ways and have a right to. Yeah. So, you know, Franky, it's interesting. I really see value in both of them. And I feel like I'm a Libra, so it's important to say I'm always seeing both sides of the story.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So anybody who understands astrology gets that. It's like I can see both. For me in this moment, I find a lot of freedom being away, but I have a deep respect for people who've stayed, deep respect for people whose families have stayed in the South in particular, who didn't migrate to the North. And that's not taking anything away from folks who did migrate. I understand that decision too. But folks who like put down roots and said, no, we're going to stay here in the midst of terror and still build community and grow and raise kids and have churches and, you know, thrive in these oppressive spaces. I have a lot of respect for that too. So I don't know that I have a clear answer for you on which way I think is more free, but I do think it's very important that people are having the conversation. And that's what I'm always trying to do with my writing, is invite Black folks in particular into a conversation around what does freedom look like? And that we need to be consciously thinking about that so that we can create it in real time, so that we're not waiting for some law to pass or for something to change on a structural level before we decide that we're free. That freedom is within us, it's accessible at all times, but I think we have to be intentional about tapping into that. So I hope the play inspires people to begin think that way or to continue to think that way if they already are.
I think it absolutely does. Personally, when they see it, they'll definitely have lots of inspiring conversation that should come from it. Another really big thrust, we've talked a lot about joy, the nature of what it means to be free and everything, but superseding virtually everything is at its core is love and support. That regardless of the option that you take, love and support seems like a central ingredient to everything. Could you talk a little bit on your views on love and support, particularly Black love in the Black community, and what that means for you personally and for the play?
Yeah, I was during the height of the pandemic back in 2020. I was talking with another playwright friend named Sanguchi Kam, who's based in New York, and we were talking about how we really desire to see more depictions of the Black love that we want in our lives on stage, on screen, and how I feel like on screen in particular, there's a lot of images of bad relationships, like things gone wrong. There's drama, there's problems, but like healthy, thriving, functioning relationships that aren't perfect by any means, but are really working through those hard issues and those hard moments. We want to see more of that. So we were like, well, we're going to have to write more of that. So that's another thing that I'm interested in, always attempting to depict and wrestle with and figure out, what does that look like? What does it mean to have unconditional love as Black folks? And what does it mean to be supported and have somebody show up for you as a Black woman? When oftentimes I think the narrative is that we're showing up and doing the support, but what does that look like in the reverse? And I know that happens too, because I can see that in my own family. I see that in my own friends, where the men provide a lot of support for the women, but I don't know that that's always depicted. So yeah, that was important to me to explore that.
And building off of that, and this is something that is I think a very, very relevant topic now, is the notion of sacrifice, when so much has been asked, especially of Black women in this society globally. And the asking for someone to, step up to the plate and do that. Could you talk to me a little bit about what that means to not just your play, but for you in terms of the conversation surrounding sacrifice? Do you feel that more sacrifice should be made from Black men, from everyone, in terms of trying to get towards a better, more equitable world?
That's an interesting question. Do I feel like more should be done on any? I don't have any big thoughts about, this group of people needs to do more for this group of people. I think I'm more curious about how folks are loving one another in their like one-to-one interactions in the everyday, like how you're treating the people under your roof, as opposed to, and I feel like with social media in particular, we get a lot of like bold declarative statements about you need to do more for this group, Black men need to do more for Black women or whatever. But I'm just like, how are we loving each other? Well, first of all, how are we loving ourselves? Like, let's start there. And then how are we loving the people who we just come in contact with? And if we can do a good job of that, then I think those ripple effects will really create those larger changes, So I don't know that I can say I feel like anyone needs to be giving up more for anybody else. I just want to see us all be more kind, tender, thoughtful, compassionate, loving. Like that's what I think we all need to be doing, if anything. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So now this is the playwright nerd question for me.
Okay.
In the play, you almost create in television, we would say that it's the split screen, talking on the phone kind of effect with this. And you're able to still keep it very theatrical. What led you to making that happen, and how did you get to creating that stage picture for us? I would just love to know, this is the playwright nerd question. That's what because it was really, really inventive. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I was curious about how do we put these folks in conversation from across the world
Mhm.
pre-screens, right?
Mhm.
Because today they will be on FaceTime or
Right,
Zoom or something.
right.
But how do we keep them connected? How would they have been connected? And it's
Right.
through old school letters. And
Mhm.
so how do we activate that theatrically in a
Mhm.
way that's not boring? Um, so those were my questions going into it. And then I was also curious about what are the sensory things that are also activated between the two of them. So there's the cologne, and I won't say more than that because I don't want
Right,
to
right.
spoil anything, but there's also like ways that we can still feel close to a person, even
Mhm.
if we're thousands of miles away from them. So yeah, I was just curious about how to create connection from far away and what that
Mhm.
looks like in the theater.
Right. Well, it was really, really well executed. It was really well
Thank
done.
you.
I loved the way that you created it and framed it. It was just really awesome. Like, again, the nerd in me was just like, this is so freaking cool right
Oh,
here.
thanks, Judy.
Just
Appreciate
just
it.
reading it, from it's one of those things where you see it. It's like, oh, she knows what she's doing. Damn. I think of
Appreciate
that.
that. Thank you.
Uh, and in one of the other one of and this is a dialogue building question, but it also goes to the heart of the plot of the play. um, you always, just as they're about to boil over, it pulls back somehow. They're reminded of their love for each other. And again, just like how there was that one line that seems very personal. The dynamics and the conversation that they were having seem to come from a place of truth. That might be me overreading it, but you really navigated the dialogue of a relationship really well, where you can only cross so far before you have to pull it back a
Mhm.
little bit and try to reground it. Could you tell me a little bit about the writing process of that, boil and then bring it down to a simmer, boil and bring it down to a simmer, that you accomplish
Yeah.
with the script? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's theatrically fun to watch,
Hmm.
right? As an audience member to be like, ooh, how far are they gonna go?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because some plays they go all the way. They say the
Hmm.
thing where you're like, okay, y'all ain't coming back from that. Like, who's
Right.
afraid of
Right.
Virginia Woolf? Like, they
Right.
just is like,
Yeah. They
but
killed
I
him.
think
Yeah.
with this exploration, it's like, but what does love look like? Even when you're
Hmm.
mad, even when you've
Yeah.
had it up to here with that person, it's
Hmm.
certain stuff you can't say. So you
Yeah.
have that little voice that taps you on the shoulder. And it's like, but you love
Hmm.
this person. Like,
Right.
calm down, bring it back.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's fun to kind of push the limits of how far can this go and still stay in a loving place.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's what it's rooted in.
Yeah. Oh,
And yeah, yeah.
it was beautifully, beautifully crafted. What I do want to do is I do want to thank you so very much for this wonderful, wonderful play. As I said, I
Thank
was a
you.
huge fan. They asked me to do notes for each play, and I was like, "What notes can I give to this play?" I mean,
Oh, thank you.
so
I'm
for
honored by
me,
that.
yeah, it was a beautiful piece of work, and there's so much that it spans in just such a brief amount of time. And I do hope that everyone is able to come out to come see it. All the plays are great. This one is wonderful, wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I just really, really love it. And I just would like to give you the floor if there's anything that you would like to say, or anything that you feel is important to mention about the play. It is completely yours. And close it out. You got the last word on this.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored by that. And thank you so much for the kind words and for understanding what I was up to with this play. I think my final words are just of gratitude. I'm so grateful to Miss Teresa, to Bishop Arts Theater Center, to Morgana. And I also want to add that this play is in conversation with Benitha and Asagai from Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun.
Mhm.
I feel like these characters definitely would have been friends with them, and they carry that conversation forward that they're having. So if anybody's a fan of Raisin, I invite you to come and experience what Clyde and Lynette have to say on the
Mhm.
subject matters as well. So thank you again so much for this time and the opportunity to share my thoughts and some of the inner workings of how this play came to be.